Well, I mean, definitely in the beginning, I had no intention or whatsoever that what I was practicing and what I'm still practicing now would lead to this to begin with. But martial art has a very, very deep meaning as far as my life is concerned, because...
Hello guys, and welcome to episode 3 of the Bloodsport podcast. You're currently joining me here from sunny London. It's 30 degrees outside and I literally feel like I could pass out from sunstroke recording this, but hey, let's give it a whirl. This week I'm going to give a preview of the upcoming main event between Dustin Poirier and Dan Hooker, and the co-main between Platinum Mike Perry and Mickey Gall. I'm going to look at the co-main first because for a man who's coming off a 2-fight losing streak, Platinum Mike Perry, he really has to be one of the most talked about fighters on the roster at the moment. The guy's had a wild few months. He's been in a highly publicised social media spat with Darren Till. He's parted ways with his Fusion XL gym in Florida, and he's now become his own trainer alongside his girlfriend, and she's got zero experience in martial arts, and she's going to be solely in his corner on Saturday night. It's definitely one of the most bizarre things I've seen in my days watching MMA, but I must admit I really like the story here, and the media really seems to be feeding off it too, and I think it's even added to propelling this fight. I really like Mike Perry though. Back in Ireland we would refer to him as a bit of a character. The dude, he's just really eccentric. Last night I was watching his interview with Ariel Helwani, and it seemed like the two final brain cells in his head were fighting it out. It was a real all over the place interview, and his preparations for the fight, they seem to be absolutely all over the place. His whole camp just seems to be so undisciplined, and he told this really odd story about getting into a fight 6 months ago with two nightclub bouncers, and it absolutely left his hands in pieces as a result. He definitely didn't seem to be in a great place, but he was saying the complete opposite in the interview. He was saying it's the best fight week he's had. He said he's been settled, the training's going well, he's doing better without having a trainer beside him, without having a dietitian, and just making his own decisions. It seems like he's completely unprepared, but regardless, I think he's actually going to win this fight. And I'll tell you what, if he does win, it's going to really propel his career, because the UFC love a storyline and they'll be able to market the shit out of that. The shortcomings of Mickey Gall are going to be pivotal in Perry winning, in my opinion. Firstly, I don't think that Gall has any real striking of note. He's been apparently working on this during the downtime, and really the entirety of his game is based around takedowns. I rate Perry as a pretty decent grappler, and he has got a 70% takedown defense. I know that Cowboy Cerrone did manage to take Perry down and ultimately submit him, but Cowboy is a much bigger man than Gall, and Gall definitely won't be able to do what Cowboy done. Secondly, I don't think Gall has the best gas tank, and if Perry roughs him up in the first round, I don't think he's going to cope well with that in the second and third if it goes that far. Perry's definitely more durable, and he will fare better the longer the fight goes on. Lastly, experience will play a factor, and Mike Perry is aware of this. He said in multiple interviews he thinks that Gall isn't of the same ilk as some of the other fighters he's faced in his career to date. Notably, Perry has faced Vicente Luque and Neal in his last two fights, and both of those guys are absolute animals, whereas Gall's relatively been spoon-fed thus far in his UFC career, and I don't think he's hit the heights that they thought he would. But without completely dismissing Mickey Gall, he does have a chance of winning if he can use his jiu-jitsu. He's got a black belt in it, and I really don't think Mike Perry is prepared well for that. According to Twitter, his two training partners that he brought in were a blue belt and a white belt, and those ranks will not prepare him at all for the level that Mickey Gall is going to bring to the fight. The only thing is that I think that Mike has the slight advantage in that he is shorter and he's carrying a lot of muscle. So I think Gall will struggle to get him down, especially with the good grappling that I mentioned earlier. But one other thing Mickey Gall does have on Mike Perry is he's got very good dirty boxing against the cage, and that will be another area that he'll have the upper hand in. But ultimately, my pick will be Mike Perry for this fight. He says that he's built up a lot of anger over the past months, and on the night he's going to release it all. So I'm going to predict that Mike Perry wins via knockout in the second round. Right, I'm going to move on to the main event between Dustin Poirier and Dan Hooker next. I'm really looking forward to this one, and it's been so hyped on social media. I think they're two fan favourites in their own right. Dan Hooker seems to be getting a lot of hate online, but he's also got kind of a cult following. Both fighters, they really have something to prove in this one. I think it's nearly the polar opposite to last weekend's card, where Blades and Volkov headlined, where them two fighters, for whoever won, we didn't really know what was next in store for them. But for Poirier and Hooker, whoever wins, they're going to get a big fight on the back of this one. I'm going to start by running through my thoughts on Dustin Poirier. I've been following this guy's career basically since he fought Conor McGregor back in the featherweight division all those years ago. I think his decision to move up to lightweight shortly after that, it's just a great advertisement for fighters fighting close to their natural weight. I think Darren Till moving up to middleweight is also a great example of that. But Poirier, he really has a first-class resume. He's beaten one of the best featherweights of all time in Max Holloway. He bet the next lightweight challenger, Justin Gaethje, and he really pushed Khabib to a point that I guess we never really seen before. He nearly submitted him with a guillotine, and he had him rocked at one point with a right hook. I think his best asset, though, is his sick striking. It's so accurate, and he just throws at such volume. The guy, he seems to triangulate on the head and just absolutely tees off. Against Justin Gaethje, I think he threw just over 300 shots to the head, and he landed nearly half of them. He also knows how to land a takedown if the opportunity presents, and he has a phenomenal ground and pound if he does get you down. He's also a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and although he doesn't really use it too often, he has great submission defense, and I think that just adds to his overall game tremendously. Personally, I think it would be foolish for Hooker to step into a straight-up fistfight with Poirier. I think it's not only because of the striking, but it's mainly because he's just so durable. In the Justin Gaethje fight in particular, he was cracked with some absolute bombs in nearly all the rounds, and those shots would have sent most fighters to sleep. But Poirier, he more or less said thank you very much, and he followed up with some heavy shots of his own. I think it will be interesting to see what version of Poirier shows up on the night. He seems to have two different modes of fighting. It seems that if he respects the power of his opponent, he'll be way more methodical and he'll set up his shots. Whereas if he doesn't think his opponent has the power to knock him out, he tends to start at a frightening pace to put them away early. I think some examples of this is if you compare the level of caution that he used against Gaethje and Alvarez into comparison when I was actually watching it this morning when he fought Anthony Pettis, where he basically walked forward from the start and just looked to blow him out of the water. But that's enough on Poirier. I'm going to give my thoughts now on Dan Hooker, who definitely has a great chance of winning this fight. He's a bookmaker's underdog coming in, and I see that Chael Sonnen, I was watching a video last night, he was questioning if confidence may be an issue for Hooker coming into the fight, and I'm not really sure if I'm actually buying into that. He's training in City Gym at the moment in Auckland, which is churning out some of the best fighters to grace the sport. They have two current champions in Alex Volkanovski and Izzy Adesanya, and I'm sure if Dan's training with those guys and he's having them constantly in his ear all the time, he'll be coming into this fight absolutely brimming with confidence. He's got an impressive record and he's got some very big scalps on it. Let's not forget he gave the number one contender at the moment, Gilbert Burns, the only knockout on his record. I was really impressed with Hooker's performance in that fight, mainly because once he had Burns down, he didn't panic. He landed more clean shots and he never gave Burns the chance to recover. And maybe that experience might actually serve him well at the weekend. But if Hooker is going to win the fight, I definitely think his best approach would be to rely on countering Poirier. He will be the bigger man coming into the fight, and he will have a 3-inch reach, which Poirier is going to have to close. If he can catch him on the way in with some knees, uppercuts. And considering Dustin, he seems to throw very heavily on his front foot. If Hooker can throw in some feints, he might be able to put Poirier off balance. And if he keeps doing that, it'll shift the odds in his favour as the rounds go by. But just going back to Poirier putting so much weight on his leading leg, I think it could be an area that Dan Hooker could exploit, because Dan's got these crazy low calf kicks. They're ultra low. They seem to catch his opponents just above the ankle. And Dustin doesn't really seem to check a whole lot of leg kicks. And over the course of the 5 rounds, which I think this fight is going to go, it could really, really slow him down. And I think it's definitely an avenue that Hooker should explore. Right, so I'm going to move on to making my prediction for this fight. I've actually found it very tough to pick a winner for this one, as I think it's going to be very, very close, and we're going to definitely go close to the distance, but I think there will be a knockout. I'm going to go with Dustin Poirier because I think his resume is just a bit more than Dan Hooker. I think he's been in some fights that the experience from them will prove pivotal in him getting the win. So I'm going to go with Dustin Poirier via knockout in the 4th round. So on that, this leads me to the end of the episode, and I'd like to thank anyone who's stuck around to listen. And as always, if you're not following us on Twitter, if you can follow Orbital MMA, that would be greatly appreciated. Everyone, enjoy the fight on Saturday night and have a great weekend.